Hello, it is March 26th, Wednesday at 9:03 p.m. and I'm here. It's my pleasure to be doing a little stream here with Sandi Parker. Sandi, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. You?
I'm doing great, and I really appreciate you doing this with me to put it in the record to have something out there people can watch and learn and grow. And so, Sandi, your current claim to fame and reason for being here is because you were a person who received, and I will put it up on the screen here if I can do this right. You received a presidential pardon from none other than Donald Trump. And here is your pardon relating for your activities on January 6, 2021. And we're going to talk all about those activities tonight and hopefully learn a lot about what actually happened, what how things transpired, and most importantly, what happened after the events on January 6th, 2021, and what happened to you and how you came to get to the position of needing, wanting, and having a presidential pardon. So, thank you for being here. So, why don't I just open it up to you to talk a little bit about how you got I take it you're a Trump person. You
Yes.
weren't Antifa that was going there to and how you got kind of there. What we're going to try to do is talk a little bit about how you got there, what happened in the justice system after, and then how you came to today with a presidential pardon. So why don't you start with how did how did you come to? I guess we could even start making it more fun. How did you come to be a Trump supporter, and how did you end up on January 6th?
Well, I at first I wasn't sure about Trump when he ran the first time. I thought he was kind of brash and, I wasn't sure about this guy, but the alternative was Hillary Clinton. And to me, that's no alternative. I was not having the thought of that just terrified me. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to give him a shot and he's talking a good game and sounds like he's got some good ideas. So I I voted for him and I went to some rallies and I really liked what I heard. I liked the energy when you go to one of the rallies.
Okay.
It just, I thought, and then when he got elected the first time, and I thought he did a fantastic job in spite of all of the difficulty that Democrats and others put him through, but he
Okay.
still got a lot done. So I was definitely in for the
So
next
how did you
election.
come to end up at January 6th? So you already told me before that you went to some Trump rallies in Cincinnati and so forth. So you're familiar with Trump rallies and Trump people. How did you come to be at January 6th?
Well, I wanted to go specifically to that one because it was going to be his last, since he had lost the election. And I really wanted to be there in support. So my husband and I were a little afraid to go to DC by ourselves. And we actually connected with a couple of people who had been at the Stop the Steal rally. There was a rally up in Columbus after the
Okay.
election. So we met these people. They had served in the military, seemed like nice people. And so when we couldn't find any of our friends or family to go with us to Washington for January 6th, my husband reached out to one of those people and they said, yeah, we're going to go. We were at a rally there in December and it's kind of crazy and you're right to be scared. Antifa has been attacking elderly and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So we actually went, we found out right before we were going to leave to go to DC that they were actually members of the Oath Keepers. And I
Okay.
looked them up online and
So
because
at
I,
that point in time, you didn't know anything about the Oath Keepers, or
no,
I don't
no,
know that I still know anything about the Oath Keepers, but
yeah. Well, I had never heard of them. And so I looked them up online and it said that they were people that had served in the military, law enforcement, EMS, or fire. So I thought, oh, that's great. I feel safe.
Okay.
So we went with them and they said, well, we're going to go a day early because the Oath Keepers, we're going to be meeting up with other Oath Keepers and we're going to be providing security for events the day before and the rally and speeches after and all that good stuff. So, and they said, if you guys want to hang out with us, you're welcome to do that. It's not going to be anything dangerous, but, you know, just dress in camo or something, you know, so you look like you're part of the group. So we said, okay, fine. So we went to DC and we did help with security the day before. There was speeches at Freedom Plaza and just sit around barricades, make sure people don't hop over. And then the day of the event, the rally at the Ellipse, the Oath Keepers actually had security clearance to work the event itself. And they were helping escort VIPs to and from the event. So, but we weren't part of that. So we
security clearance from the Trump campaign, from who?
I would say probably, I don't know. There were Secret Service that were monitoring who was going in and out of the venue because they kind of had, so I'm guessing that they would have had it from them. So they worked that event. And so we were standing outside watching on the Jumbotron. And then after he finished speaking, the two people that we were with, they came back and we all headed down toward the Capitol because they were supposed to be providing security for some speeches that were going to be on the grounds. So, and in fact, we actually escorted a woman whose son was to speak at the on the grounds of the Capitol. And she was afraid to walk by herself. So we escorted her. She walked with our group. And but when we got to the Capitol,
so hold on. So you listened to the Trump speech first and then went down to the Capitol, or how did that?
Yes, we listened to the whole thing.
And by the way, my understanding, I'm having, you know, and some people might know that I hosted a panel discussion of this with people that had gone to January 6th 3 weeks after, and I'm just now remembering because I was trying to recollect my memory of that, and that it was wasn't it bone chilling cold?
Yes.
When this all happened,
it was very cold, and Trump was actually about half an hour, 40 minutes late to speak. So we didn't get down to the Capitol. By the time we got there, everything, the bad stuff, I think a lot of it had already happened. But there weren't any, the thing that I thought was kind of weird was there were no barricades. You know, you would think you see those black metal fences and stuff they put around the Capitol. There wasn't any of that. And so we walked up the pathway and this group, we were with this group of Oath Keepers, and they were concerned, I think, that there was maybe some Oath Keepers that had gotten to the Capitol before us and might have been in there and not been able to get out or something, but they decided they were going to go in and help. So I actually, my husband.
So hold on, let me jump back here. So you get down to the Capitol. One of the questions I really wanted to ask you was, so you told me, I'm going to put up a map here just because I had shown you this and it's from when we did this event. Okay, so let me share this here. Okay, so here's a map, and it has, there's a map on the right side of this, and then there's a diagram. So there's the Capitol in the diagram, and I could put my mouse over there and see if we can see it, but there's the Capitol. It goes down to there's the Ellipse, there's the Washington Monument, and then the White House is over this way to the right. Okay, and here's a map that shows the same thing. Here's the Capitol, here's the Washington Monument, here's the White House. So Trump spoke up around here somewhere.
Correct.
Then people came down. Now, you told me before we get to getting there, you told me that you came down in a way maybe along, you thought maybe Pennsylvania Avenue or something, but you ended up on the east side of the Capitol where you ended up walking down, not the west side, where
Correct.
when people saw like the platform and stuff like this, like where you've seen speeches and inaugurations before, that's where a lot of, the stuff we saw on TV was on the west side of the Capitol. You ended up on the east side of the Capitol, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And you were with these guys that were oath keepers. And so when you just said, they were worried about this, one of the questions I had was, well, when you got down there, did you like immediately? So you went into the Capitol at some point, to my understanding. Was that like almost immediately you went in, or you were down there kind of milling around, wondering what's going
I
on, and
think
how kind of did that
I
develop?
think we milled around for a little bit. And I was with my husband too, and he was having a lot of trouble walking. He
Okay.
had back issues, and so he just wanted to find a place to sit. So, and then I would say we probably milled around for maybe about 5 minutes. And then we decided to go around to the east side. We walked up,
Well,
there's
hold
a
on a second here. So
walkway.
you were on the west side to start with, or where were you
No,
that then
no,
you
we
went to
were
the east?
like on the side
Okay, so
of the
over
cap.
like where my mouse is now,
So
like
that
over there.
we would be what would be considered, I guess, the north side of the
Okay,
Capitol. Yes, where your
which
mouse
would
is.
be here,
Yeah, we were
kind
over
of the
there.
White House side.
Yeah.
Okay, then
And
you went here, and then you
mhm.
went, and then so how long were you down there before you went into the Capitol? About.
I would say we probably milled around down on the north side for a few minutes, and then we walked around to the east side, and then there was a huge, huge crowd of people. And so there was people all up on the steps, they were everywhere. And so
On the east
we
side.
yes, on the east side.
Okay. On
And
all, like when I look at the east side, it looks like there'd be three sets of steps over here.
yes. So the
And so
middle
all of those
steps,
steps were full of people, basically.
um I don't know that the two on either end, but the ones in the middle, and that's where we
Okay.
went in. Those steps were absolutely full.
Okay.
And there were people all over on the ground, they were everywhere. And so this was one of the things that came up at the trial, is that we they called it a stack formation, because basically we went single file.
Well, hold on. Before we get into that,
Mhm.
here's my question. You get down there, I take it you're on those steps or around those steps. Why did you feel compelled to go in the first place?
Because I felt like that something bad was happening, and I felt like that there could be people that were injured, and I wanted to help. I just wanted, I had training as a medic diver. I used to scuba dive, and the person that I was with, she was a medic in the Army, so she had medical training. And so I
Okay.
basically just followed her, and the other guy that we were with. And he had been a Marine, so he had some medical training as well. And so I just followed them thinking, I can go in there and help. And if I can also help bring people out, because, if they're having trouble, getting
Okay.
people out of the building, that's
So
what I,
you went in thinking that there was trouble in there that you could help medically
yes,
anybody that was hurt. Okay.
yes,
Or to persuade people to leave or dissuade anybody. At that
right.
point in time, did you know what was going on? What did you
No.
think was going on, and why?
I had no idea. Uh, and you look back on it, hindsight's 55th, or yeah, 2020. I mean,
Yeah.
um, but at the time, it just seemed like an emergency situation. And so you just react and you want to help. And I was with this group of oath keepers who had training. They had been in the military and, law enforcement and stuff. And I thought these people can help get things under control. If there's chaos, if there's
Well,
injured.
what did you feel that when the speech ended and you were going down there, did you feel like did the people that were walking down from the end of the speech know that there was something calamity going on at the Capitol?
No, no,
Okay,
nobody. Yeah.
and did you feel like, what were you had there not been any calamity, had there not been any uh issues going on, what would you have done when you got to the Capitol?
I would have helped with the security. I mean, can't really help, but I was hanging out with these oath keepers who we walked there because they were going to be providing security for a number of speeches that were scheduled on the Capitol grounds. So that's the reason we walked there in the
On
first
the
place.
east side of the Capitol or the west side of the Capitol?
Um, I think on the east side, actually. I think that's
Okay.
why they walked up that way. But obviously, and we didn't know, walking down that way to the Capitol that things had been canceled because of this protest or whatever you want to call it
Do
that
you
had
know if the
started.
speeches or whatever was going to happen there had permits,
Yes,
or
they did.
if there
They did.
permits required?
Yes.
Yes, they had permits and then they
Yes,
got
they had
canceled, or what?
permits. Yes.
Okay, so some people had some permits to have some speeches.
Yes.
So you got there, there's calamity when you approach so those are called the Columbus doors when where
Yes.
you go forward.
Hmm.
Had you ever been in the Capitol before?
No.
Like as a
No.
tourist or anything? Okay.
No.
So the when you get there and go up the steps, what happened? Well, first off, before we even get to that, what was the law enforcement presence like during all of this? Like from the speech down, to the doors, you said there's calamity, you were afraid people were hurt. Describe for me a little bit what the law enforcement presence was that you saw outside the Capitol. I know you told me before about some stuff inside the Capitol, but outside the Capitol, what was your observation?
I did not see like when we were on the north side, I didn't see any law enforcement. When we came around to the east side, um initially I didn't see any. But then as we went up the steps, I noticed standing off to the left as you're facing the Columbus doors,
Okay.
um, there's like a plaza up at the top of the steps. And so, about 15 feet from the Columbus doors, there was a bike rack. And behind that bike rack, there were probably 20 or 30 Capitol, I guess they were Capitol Police. They were police in the hard shell, like black plastic, hard, whatever kind of
Okay, like
riot gear.
riot type police
Yeah,
look.
yeah, riot gear.
Okay.
And I thought, with all these people, I would think that they would be doing something, to kind of direct people or stop people or whatever. But they were behind this bike rack doing absolutely nothing.
Well, how many
So,
people do you think, in that area, the steps, etc., hundreds of people, thousands of people, kind of just a general magnitude of how many people
um,
were?
I would probably say on the east side, I would say probably close to 1,000 people.
Okay, so close to 1,000. Um, when you had you so you're so the police, I kind of zoomed in here a little bit. So these riot police looking people you saw were up the stairs to the left but
Yes.
outside.
Yes.
Okay. And they were doing nothing, basically just standing
Correct.
there. Okay.
Correct.
Were they standing there like in a formation or just relaxed, like at ease standing there?
Um, I wouldn't I don't think they were necessarily at ease, just kind of standing around talking or anything, but they were just standing behind the bike rack.
Okay.
And,
And
they
the
were all
bike racks
facing.
the bike rack's up at the top of the steps, or this was down on the ground to the
It
left side of
was
the
no,
steps?
it was up at the top of the steps. There's like a walkway up there,
To roll a bike
and
up?
yeah, when you get to the
Okay,
top of the steps, there's like a little plaza there, and
okay.
yeah, so they were standing, just not doing anything. So I thought, you know, which is another reason why I thought, well, I guess, it must not be too bad, So, but at that point, I was already up to the top of the steps. And once you got kind of in that flow of people going into the building, you really were kind of like in a river, of people. And you
Well, what
just,
do you think that, you said that you thought there could be injured people, okay?
yes, yes.
What do you think the other people, or do you think it was just kind of a herd mentality of people walking up the steps at that point in time?
Yeah, I think people were just curious. I think, I didn't see
Okay.
anybody doing anything violent or anything. I think,
By the way, did you see any in this area at least? I don't really know the full story because you and I are going through it right now, but up to this point, had you seen any violence or acts of violence?
no, no.
Okay. Did you encounter people that you thought were looking for violence, that had any sort of instruments that would imply, I want to fight, or that seemed
Um,
that way?
yeah, I did see a few people that I kind of thought, um, made me a little nervous.
Okay.
There were a lot of people that had flags, and, they had flagpoles. And I think, to me, I thought, well, this is kind of, I mean, I think it's fine if you're just waving a flag, but I mean, these were like bigger flags, not just like
Okay.
a little handheld flag,
Okay.
and I kind of thought, well, that doesn't seem real safe when you got this many people, if somebody
Right.
gets upset, they could use it as a
Did
weapon.
you see any weapons?
Um, no, I did not.
Did the Oath Keeper guys have weapons as far as
No,
you know?
no, they did not.
Okay. And okay, so when you got up the steps, was there describe up there, was there like anybody saying stop? Any, what was there law enforcement or anybody appeared to be connected to the Capitol up the steps?
When we got to the top of the steps at the Columbus doors, the doors were wide open.
Okay.
And there were two Capitol police officers standing to like the left against the door, the doorway. Or they're just
Okay.
standing back, against, not trying to block anything or anything, just letting people in. And they didn't say, you can't be here, don't enter, you're trespassing. They didn't say anything. And I actually looked at them and I kind of, smiled and nodded to let them know, here I'm coming to help. Kind of, if I can help,
Yeah.
and but they weren't doing anything to stop anybody
But
or
they were, so I could understand, say, law enforcement, letting you through doors in fear because there's a
yeah,
mob and the
yeah.
mob's going to take care of us if we don't let them in, versus, trying to keep people from getting in would be the other extreme. Okay. Even if they're radically outnumbered. Would you describe these guys' demeanor as they were afraid of the crowd and backing down because they were afraid of the quote unquote mob, or they were just nonchalant about it?
I did not see or sense that they were afraid.
Okay.
It was just kind of like, when you go to an event and there's guards standing there and they're just kind of letting people in, and but yeah, I didn't see like fear in their eyes or a stance that indicated that they felt they were in danger.
Okay. Did so you went through the doors. Did you see police inside?
Um I'm trying to recall. I think there were some police kind of scattered, but at that point, when we first got in there, they weren't like trying to get people to leave. I think they were just kind of monitoring, to see,
Okay.
if people are going to do something.
Did okay, and did you see, like, I've seen, like, the Tucker Carlson show, videos that got released, and and even I think I told you I like to listen to liberal comedian Jimmy Dore, and he's
Right,
talked a lot about this and shown a lot of video and talk about, like, the people that were going to overthrow the government forgot to bring any weapons with them,
right,
and they politely walked between stanchions, velvet rope stanchions inside, and took the demeanor of people inside. Did you see, like, I take for granted that there's the stuff, like the videos that I've seen of people basically looking like tourists walking around inside.
right,
And then there's, potentially people up to no good or damaging, stealing, or vandalizing.
right.
Kind of what did you see of the behavior of people where you were when you went inside?
I saw most of the people I thought were like tourists. They were just kind of, looking around, kind of in awe of, because when you go in the Columbus stores, you kind of go into the rotunda, and the rotunda is a beautiful structure. And
Okay.
so there were a lot of people taking selfies and videos. There were
Okay.
a lot of photographers, professional photographers with big camera equipment. That was one thing
Okay.
that I thought was kind of interesting. There, and there were some people I think that were up to no good. I think I told you about the young man who had his mega hat on backwards, and he was going to. He had a pole or something, and he was trying to damage a portrait, break the glass or plexiglass or whatever it was. And I ran over and grabbed it and said, "Stop! What are you doing?" you know,
Okay.
you know,
And how
and
did he react when you did that?
he was just kind of shocked, at first, and then he just kind of scurried off, and I don't know where he went,
Did he
but
leave the pool? Or did he
no, no,
leave the
he took
pool
the
or take
pole
it
with
with
him,
him?
but I think he was a
Okay.
little taken aback because, I am not the kind of person that you would typically think would, you know, run over and try to stop him. But so
Well, I
he
find it very, having been to Trump rallies and stuff like that, I found it very hard to believe that a Trump person would go into any place and just vandalize something.
yeah,
I just
that
don't
was
think it
the
would happen. That's
only
just not the kind of person.
Yeah, that was the only person that I saw actually trying to vandalize anything.
Okay.
Um, yeah, there were people that were yelling, like, there were people chanting, "This is our house," that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And there were people with their decent sized flags, waving, and and being more vocal about their displeasure about the election, and that sort of thing. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, at times the noise was deafening. It was um
Okay. Now, when you went up the steps, where you get in there, like the riot cops and stuff, do you feel like, had the riot cops you saw off to the left positioned around the steps, do you feel like the crowd would have pushed forward and tried to push around them and get in, or that would have subdued them, just seeing
I
a police presence saying turn around, go back?
I I don't know. I mean, the crowd did not seem that agitated, to me. I think what happened, this is what I've heard. I wasn't over there, but I've heard that what really got the crowd riled up on the west side was that they started shooting like flashbangs and rubber bullets
Okay.
into the crowd. And that really got the crowd riled up. But
Okay.
I didn't see any of that kind of stuff happening on the east side. So, at least by the time that I got there, the crowd did not seem agitated. There were a few people, like there was a news van that had, like, the antenna and everything, and there were people on top of it. And at one point, this woman, I guess, who was responsible for this van was yelling, trying to get people off of her van.
Okay.
But, other, stuff like that. But I didn't really
W
see any.
During the whole time when you were inside, were you with these Oath Keeper guys the whole time, or did they split off, or what was kind of the
They split off at one point. We started to head down a hallway, and unbeknownst to me, the hallway actually went towards the Senate side.
Okay.
And again, there's just, so many people packed tightly in a small area. So I was kind of hanging on to Donovan, one of the people that I was with, so as to not get lost. And there was all these people pushing me from behind. And at one point, I literally kind of got torn away from him and kind of squashed up against the wall. And it was at that point that up ahead, there must have been Capitol Police, and they started firing tear gas. And at that point,
This was
I,
inside?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And it was a very contained little area, and I'm telling you, it literally took the breath away from you. And I literally cupped my hand over my nose and mouth and pulled my shirt up, and I just, with all of my strength, I pushed back against the people behind me who were trying to push forward. And of course, then they realize I'm like, back up. So I ended up back out into the rotunda, but the Oath Keeper people, they didn't come out right away. But one young man stumbled out, and he had gotten sprayed in the face, apparently.
Okay.
Because apparently that stuff shoots in the air and it can go quite a distance. And so he stumbled out. I helped him. There was like a bench in the rotunda, and I helped him to the bench. And then I had some gauze and pads, and a young man actually handed me a small bottle of Johnson's baby shampoo. And he said, use this I had a bottle of water on me. He said, use this to clean his eyes. So I took the gauze stuff and I cleaned his eyes, and he was very shaken. He was probably in his early 20s. And he kept saying to me, he said, my mom's going to kill me. My mom's going to kill me. And I'm like, let's not worry about that right now. Let's just get you out of here.
Oh, okay. So is that, you said you had gone in for fear that there were injured people that you could assist. So
Yes.
here's the, other than this person, up to that point, this is the first injured person you saw, and that was
Yes.
because of getting tear. Because
Yeah.
it sounds like they were going towards the Senate area where the senators were doing the electoral college, which would be the worst possible area to walk towards.
Yeah. Of course, they were apparently, by the time we got there, they were already evacuated, so they weren't even in there by the time that we got to the Capitol.
Okay.
Um,
So how much
so
longer how long in total do you think you were in there?
15 to 20 minutes.
And then what precipitated, time to get out of here?
Well, when the Oath Keepers came back, I don't know where they went. But when they came back, I said, we need to get this guy out. And so they helped. He was a big kid. I couldn't, you know,
Okay.
they helped him out. And then as soon as we got out, a woman followed out. She came out and kind of fell to the ground, and she was having an asthma attack. And
Okay.
so she had her inhaler, but she couldn't work it. She was just a mess. She had
Now you think she had
also,
gotten hit by the mace
I
or the
think
tear
so
gas?
too. I
Okay.
think so, yes. So I helped her with the inhaler. She had also, I guess, gotten sprayed in the face. So I cleaned out her face. And at one point, while I'm helping her, a police officer came over to me and he said, would you like me to help her to the ambulance? And I said, that would be awesome. And so he took her and helped her to an ambulance. And it was weird because when I stood up and the other Oath Keepers were there, the riot police were still standing there. And in fact, I think some of the Oath Keepers were talking to him. It was just kind of bizarre.
Okay. Had you ever been to any other, you said you hadn't been to the Capitol, but had you ever been to any other rallies or anything on the mall or any of that kind of stuff?
No. I hadn't been to DC since I was a child.
So I remember, again, liberal comedian Jimmy Dore talking about that they had what's it called? The Force the Vote rally, which was he at one point was a supporter of the Squad. This guy that now he says he's not a Trump supporter, but he sounds like one if you listen to him. But they were trying to force a vote on Medicare for all. And he said that they had a rally there that he's like, our rally, there were like more police than there were people at the rally. Like we had this thing, and he's like, and then here there was like basically no police,
Right.
So he's highly suspicious of, he presents himself as highly suspicious of the whole thing. Now you told me about, well, people talk about Antifa, so I think you could have, quote unquote, regular people. Okay. You can get regular people that get caught up in maybe being dumb or something, and then you have people that their original intent and design was ill intent. Okay. That was where they started. Did you feel like there were elements that they were there, that they had an intent, inside or outside, to cause mayhem?
To be honest, I did not see. I didn't see that. I just didn't see that. And I think more stuff happened actually on the West Side.
Okay.
But yeah, by the time
you didn't see people, so the behavior of people you saw was all kind of within a certain range, like other than the one guy that was trying to break the thing. Do you think that one guy was just an out of control Trump supporter, or?
I don't think he was a Trump supporter. I honestly thought he was Antifa.
Okay. But you never saw some over the top, like here's a, group of, face masked Antifa guys trying to, destroy something.
No.
Did you see anybody try to loot or steal anything?
No, not in, because basically I was pretty much in the rotunda, and I didn't see any of that. I did, after we came out and we were headed back to the car, there was a young man, and I don't know if he was with a group or whatever, but he had one of the police shields. One of those clear, like, police shields that he had taken off an officer at some point. And he was, walking down the walkway with it. But other than that, I didn't see anybody carrying away things, or I did one funny moment while I was in there with that young gentleman. After the rotunda cleared out a little bit, there were two people that were literally lit up a joint, and they were smoking it in the rotunda. And a police officer came over to them and said, you could take that outside. I kind of thought that was a little on the funny side, but
you think they were Trump supporters?
I don't know.
Okay,
they just seemed pretty happy, so they were not.
So you left. You go to, obviously, at a car, because you said we went to the car.
Yes.
And then you just drove home, or drove to a hotel or something, wherever you were staying.
We went back to the hotel, stayed overnight, and then left to go home the next day.
Okay. So now you're home. At some point in time, I'm assuming you get a knock on the door, or you get something, and the next thing you know, you're in in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And kind of just quickly, how did it go? How long did it take? When was it? What happened that caused you to then say, oh shit?
Yeah. That was definitely an oh shit moment. It was on February 18th that
Okay.
the FBI came in full force
Like
with,
5, 6 weeks later.
yes, with
Okay.
a large at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, with a large SWAT team. There was probably 20 to 30 agents. They had the big SWAT van or, thing, bus, whatever. They had an armored vehicle with a battering ram parked in my front yard. They were yelling for us over a bullhorn. And it would, I'm asleep. Our bedroom's in the back of the house. They're in the front. My daughter's room is in the front of the house. So she was 16 at the time. She comes knocking on the door and she said, "Mom, Dad, the FBI's out there." We're like, "What?" you know? And I got up and I looked out the window and there's all this crazy, so
You
I'm like,
said this was like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning?
yes, yes. They woke up our whole cul-de-sac. I mean, it was just insane. So
Okay.
I hurried up, put on some clothes, ran down there, and it was, cold. It was snow on the ground. It was February. And so I ran out without a coat and opened the door. And, I've got dots on my chest, and I am like, what is going on? I mean,
Wow.
yeah,
Do you have does anybody in your household have a notable criminal past or any violent criminal past?
no,
Okay.
absolutely none. I don't even have as
Okay.
much as a parking ticket.
Okay.
So,
So you
yeah.
didn't have any bank heist or anything like that, but when they pulled you
No,
up, they realized
no,
dangerous fugitive.
no, no, absolutely nothing on our records. My husband worked for the Hamilton County Juvenile Courts as a corrections officer, and I mean, we had both been, we went to China, adopted our daughter. We'd been in the FBI system, you got to get fingerprinted, you got a gazillion times. And so, yeah, nothing. We had absolutely no record. And
Now, did you at this time, the other people that had been with you or in the party, had any of them, how did they get arrested? I'm assuming they got arrested too. How
yes,
did they get arrested? Was it like at basically the same time or?
I think they actually got arrested before us.
Okay.
But they lived up around Woodstock, Ohio, so they weren't
Okay.
like on our local news. I don't think. I don't remember, but yeah. So they got arrested. I don't know, probably maybe early February.
Okay.
So but yeah. So then they came into the house. They said they had a warrant, but I always thought, never having experienced anything like that, I always thought the warrant had to say what they're looking for. You're coming in, we're looking, whatever. We got a warrant for your arrest, and we got a warrant to search your house.
Okay.
But the warrant basically was just a piece of paper where they listed all the property that they took out of our house.
It was
And
already listed on there, or they
no,
listed
it
what they
wasn't.
took?
It wasn't listed at all. It was blank. It was basically blank. And they didn't show it to us.
So it's not like not having experienced this. It's not like on TV where
Right.
they have the warrant and then somebody's looking at the warrant for what it
Right.
says.
Right. Yeah, I had never experienced that. So I only knew, what you see on TV. So
What kind of stuff did they take from your house?
they took all of our electronics, our computers, our iPads, our phones, our flash drives, my husband was a gun collector, and he had a lot of historic guns, but then he had some, other guns. He liked to target shoot.
Okay.
So they took like 20 boxes of guns,
When you
over
say 20 boxes of guns, you mean
yeah.
20 guns or 20 or
Um,
how
I
many
think
guns do you think?
I think he probably I think he probably had about 25 guns of different,
Okay.
like I said, a lot of them are historical.
Well,
Um,
I come to realize like my wife's dad is a hunter. I was never a hunter. And just like being a hunter, he has a shitload of guns because you have like different guns for every kind of hunting you do. And,
yeah, I mean, Ben
you know,
never was a hunter, but he just he liked to
he's like a
target shoot.
collector.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was a collector.
Okay.
And and we had probably over 4,000 rounds of ammo. So of
Okay.
course they took all of that. And then they shackled us, belly chains, ankle shackles, the whole 9 yards. Took us to
Both you and your husband?
yes, yes.
Even though he hadn't even been there, right?
Well,
I'm
he
sorry. Was
was
he?
there, but he
Oh,
didn't
I'm
go
sorry. Yeah, I
in.
never really
Yeah,
asked.
yeah. He did not go into the Capitol.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So same treatment.
So then what
And
happens? They haul you off to where?
they took us to the FBI headquarters in Kenwood
Okay.
in separate cars. And then they interviewed us. And I think they were under um going by the theory that the Oath Keepers had planned this this thing to stop the vote, to
Okay.
shut down, that there was some conspiracy. And because we were with Oath Keepers, then we, of course, were part of that conspiracy. And the FBI that interrogated me basically kept asking me, you know, about, well, what was the plan, or what was this, or what was, and I said there was no plan. I said, if there was a plan, if the Oath Keepers had a plan, they kept it secret from us. They did not share it with us.
Okay.
There was no plan. I wasn't part of any plan. So,
Did you feel like the FBI people were relatively nice people or not nice people, honest people, not honest people? What'd you feel about them as
I think that they came across as nice because they want you to cooperate. Now, one thing that really ticked me off was that we had our 16-year-old daughter. And I kept asking, where's my daughter? Who's my daughter with? And they lied to me and they told me that she was with a neighbor. And I said, well, which neighbor? Well, she's just with a neighbor. She's fine. They lied to me.
where was she?
She was at my sister's house.
Okay. Did they question her?
No, no. What, my daughter?
Yeah.
No, no, they did not.
Okay.
But yeah, so I didn't find that out, and my sister and I are kind of estranged. So Katie did not want to go to her aunt's,
Did they
and
take her there?
no, they called my sister and brother-in-law.
Okay, so they facilitated her going
Yeah,
there. Okay.
yes.
Okay, so then you get interrogated. What they put you in a cell? What do they do with you?
After we got interrogated, they drove us down to the federal building, to the marshal's office, and basically turned us over to the marshals. And then they put us, still shackled, put us in these little stainless steel holding cells. That's the only way I can describe it. Separate cells.
Okay.
And we had to wait until we could go before a judge. So it was during the COVID stuff, so they were going to do it by video. So we waited most of the day. They gave us attorneys that we never really met. And fortunately, the judge, she looked at our record. She said, I guess there
This
was
was this a DC judge,
no.
whatever the district is in Cincinnati judge? What
Yes,
judge?
yes. It was a federal judge in Cincinnati.
Okay.
And so the
Just as an aside, could it have been a federal magistrate or was it a judge?
I don't know. I really
Okay.
don't know.
Okay.
But the prosecutor was from DC and wanted us to be put in jail. And the judge said, no, I don't think that's necessary. And so she basically had us released on our own recognizance. So we didn't have to put up any bail or bond or whatever. Um, just let us go. But they put ankle monitors on at that point.
Okay. So
So
if you at some point can look up who that judge was, because not on something like our magistrate, because I've had some dealings with the federal circuit in Cincinnati, and I've never had any bad dealing. I mean, I've never had any where I
yeah,
thought they were ridiculously
this
unfair
was
or
a
anything.
woman,
Yeah.
and she
So
seemed reasonable.
okay, so you're at home. You had no restrictions on your movement. I guess you couldn't
Yes.
leave the country or anything. But
No, we were restricted because we were on ankle monitors. So we could only be out at certain times a day, and we couldn't leave the Southern District of Ohio.
okay,
So we were on the ankle monitors for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then they took those off. But we were still restricted. We could go out, then we weren't restricted by time of day or where or anything like that. But we were
okay.
still restricted to the Southern District of Ohio. Um, so that went on until we went to trial.
So how long was it from then until so that you said it was about what 5 weeks after the event that you
Yeah.
got 5 or 6
It was
weeks.
February 18th.
Then you were on the ankle monitors for a couple 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had so how far in the future was your quote unquote trial?
It was the following. It started February 1st of 2023. So it was
Did
actually
you
2 years,
okay?
almost 2 years.
Did you have your own counsel at this point in time, or what was your lawyer situation?
We were appointed DC lawyers because you have to hire a DC lawyer. And so we met the criteria for court appointed. So we had court
And
appointed.
were they? Did you meet these lawyers?
We met them on Zoom because we would have hearings with the judge and the other. It started out, there were like 17 people on our, I don't know if it's an indictment. I don't know, whatever. There were 17 people. They were oath keepers. Okay.
Okay.
So, and then they ended up at some point splitting them into 3 groups.
Okay.
So there were what they considered like the head oath keepers were in the first oath keeper trial. And then there was the next tier down, which was in the second oath keeper trial. And then there were people like us who were kind of, at the bottom of the food
Okay.
chain. And so, yeah, ours was the third, what
And
they call
you're
post.
saying kind of like your trials were done. You were done as one trial, or like separate
Yeah,
trials, but you were kind of in a group.
we were tried in a group. So there were 3 different
Did you
trials.
know all the other people? Were these people you
No,
knew?
no. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were on
I
trial
don't know a
with.
lot about the law, but I know in my cousin Vinny, they had the 2 kids up on the charges together because it was the same exact crime.
Yeah,
But I didn't know they did that when you were just another, you just happened to be there like
yeah.
at the same time. So how did that what happened in the trial?
Uh, it was crazy. It was 6-week trial in DC, and we were on trial with 4 other people we didn't know. And it was just ridiculous. I every day I would go there and I'd think, you got to be kidding me.
So you were physically there for this.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I thought, I kept thinking, do these prosecutors really believe this stuff? I mean, are they? It was just ridiculous. They had a theory about, again, like I said, this conspiracy to, you know, have an insurrection or stop the count or whatever. And, it was like they instruct the jury, well, you don't really have to agree to be part of the conspiracy. You could just be a wink and a nod or you
Well, did you get like, so I'm a little confused on this. You said you and four other people,
and
you and
my
your
husband,
husband?
me and my husband and four other people. Yes.
Okay, so six people in total.
Yes.
Okay. And I thought that, and you were being charged with what? What was the crime you were being charged with?
I was charged with obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of law enforcement, discharging their duties or something like that, destruction of federal property, tampering with evidence, and entering and remaining on restricted grounds.
Were all the people, was your husband charged with the same things?
He was not charged with destruction of federal property or the tampering charge. But he was charged of the obstruction one, or the official proceeding ones, and
so the people and the four other people, they were charged with the same kind of things, or
yes, yes.
Okay, and but not it wasn't like they all had the same charges, like you robbed the bank together, and you get, but they were kind of different, a little bit different.
For the most part, they were pretty similar. They were pretty much.
Okay, yeah, your husband had okay.
Yes.
I'm a little, okay, so those kind of things, I'm thinking like, if I rob the store, if I go to my cousin Vinny and I supposedly robbed, out of the store and then killed somebody, the witnesses are like, if you remember my cousin Vinny, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
The guy that was cooking his grits, looking through the window. You have your witnesses that are people that say, yes, he's the one that did it. I saw him do it. That he was the person that was in the store, blah, blah, blah. Kind of what were the witnesses against you? Because it sounds like the charges, weren't, it wasn't like you were, let's say you had been breaking the portrait and you were charged with destroying the portrait, and there was a cop that could testify, I watched her destroy the portrait. Right. Who were the witnesses against you? How did they prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you had done these things?
Well, the only witnesses that they called, and it was just bizarre because it wasn't like the witnesses testified more in general. They didn't say Sandi Parker did this. I saw her do this. It wasn't like that. It was like this one supervisor with the Capitol Police. She said that in order for them to have made it to where they were on the east side, they would have had to cross 5 different barriers, 5 different levels of barriers. And they'd have a map, they'd put up and they'd say, this is where all these barriers were. Well,
okay, so you didn't have like direct witnesses. Like I watched her cross these supposed barriers. No. I watched her do this. So the things that you would think would be required, the funny thing is, it's like, I've never been involved in a criminal thing, despite our prosecutor, Mark DeCalvey, trying to find something on this, but you think of like, they have the burden. You think of like the government has the burden of proof, of what you did that was it. And it sounds like it wasn't like, well, I'm assuming you didn't have text messages on your cell phone talking about how we were going to stop the vote count.
No.
Or, secretly sharing the plans on what door we're going to go in.
No.
So there was no direct evidence of you being in some. So the evidence was just what? Were there pictures? Like, here they are. Look, here's a picture of them in the Capitol.
The only picture, I think they did have picture CCTV camera footage of
Yeah.
me in that hallway, barely in that hallway that led to the Senate.
Okay.
But I was only there if I was even there 5 minutes.
Okay.
So I didn't get very far, and I didn't, I was in a big bunch of other
The
people.
other people, did you guys all have the same lawyers?
No, we had all different
Well, how
lawyers.
does this happen? It seems like it'd be crazy how you
It
would do a
was crazy.
trial where you have like 6 different people on trial
And
simultaneously, all
and
with different
some of the
lawyers.
people had 2 lawyers. So there were more lawyers than there were defendants.
So did you have a jury?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And did were you there when they did like jury selection?
Yes, the voir dire. Yes.
Did you feel like your lawyers were doing as good job? Or I mean, I heard, DC courts, and so I could imagine, if it was a TV show or something. I know lawyer mostly from TV, like, some TV show that's not true, but kind of like, this is the best we're going to get. This is a rough place to get. Did they
They
seem to have a passion for you guys not getting railroaded, or were they
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
clown lawyers?
I think for the most part, there was one lawyer who was awful. He was a court appointed. He was awful.
Okay.
But that was somebody else's lawyer, fortunately. But there were some very good lawyers too. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard the lawyer named Stanley Woodward.
Okay. No.
He has actually represented Peter Navarro. He represented Trump's, the guy that worked on Mar-a-Lago grounds that got tied up in that
Okay.
classified
So he
document.
was one of your lawyers?
He was not one of mine, but he was a lawyer for one of the oath keepers.
Now, but the
Um,
people in your group of 6 people, were there some that were, I think the way you've described it is you weren't an oath keeper. You
no,
happened to tag along with these oath keeper guys. Where some of these actual people would say, like, yes, I'm an oath keeper.
yes, they were. The
Okay.
other people were oath keepers.
Okay. And so did any of them get off, or did everybody get convicted?
Everybody except Michael Green. Michael Green wasn't actually an oath keeper either, but he had his own private security business.
Okay.
And so he was involved with the head of the oath keeper, Stuart Rhodes.
Okay.
And they were providing security for high targets, or whatever you want to call them, like Roger Stone, people like that.
Okay.
So Michael Green got off with a misdemeanor, I think entering and remaining on Capitol ground or restricted grounds. I think he got
Okay.
off with that. My husband got off with the obstruction of official proceeding and entering and remaining on restricted grounds.
But he
But
never entered the Capitol itself.
no, no, no. And so the other people, everybody else, we all got convicted of everything, pretty much.
So you are okay. So even though there was no direct evidence, they wouldn't, I would assume, be able to show that you had any notable tie with these Oath Keeper guys other than going to this thing with them.
Right. There
Like
was
you
nothing.
didn't go to whatever Oath Keeper meetings there are or
No,
anything
no.
like this, but you got convicted. Did you feel it was a kangaroo court?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will say the judge I thought was fair, and he tried to run a fair trial. He was an Obama appointee, but I thought I have nothing
So
bad to
how do
say.
you think, so he gives the jury instructions and stuff like that. So
Yes,
the jury would be the ones that found you guilty.
right.
How did that happen, do you feel?
Oh, I
If the
know
judge was
exactly.
fair, and assuming
I
he
know
gave fair
exactly
jury
how it
instructions.
happened.
What you
One of
say?
the, oh, I know exactly how it happened. One of the jurors, Ellen, she went by Ellen. She worked for CNN and C-SPAN for 30 plus years. So 2 days after our trial ended, She did an hour and 45-minute interview with C-SPAN about her experience on the jury. And believe me, I started listening to that because my lawyer sent me the link. I started listening to it. I couldn't listen to it. It took me 6 months before I could listen to it because it was so disgusting.
Well, but here's what throws me is that all you would need to get off is that there's one juror who won't go along.
Oh, yeah. Well, there were 4 that didn't want to go along. There were 4 jurors that were holdouts. And there was 6 days of deliberation. And this Ellen kept browbeating, and she was not going to give up. And I think these 4 holdouts, I mean, it was so, according to her in this interview she gave, they disliked her so much they wouldn't even look at her. They turned their backs to her. But in the end, I think they thought, we're never going to get out of here unless we just go along with this.
Well,
And
do you know
so,
who was the jury foreman?
I don't know. I mean, you don't know their
Okay.
names. But
Because I
you know,
think in theory, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think in theory, a jury foreman can, like want to tell the judge we're deadlocked or we're,
they did.
not.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And the judge would send them back, and then they would ask questions, they'd ask for clarification. I mean, this went on for 6 days. And but in the end, and the attorneys actually polled the jurors individually. Is this your verdict? Is this your verdict?
Yeah. And they all said yes.
Yeah. But it was,
Do they do that on each of the things you're getting convicted of?
huh?
Do they do that polling the jury on each thing you're getting convicted of?
No, no.
Okay.
They just, ask if this is your verdict for, if
I mean,
they
because
go
just from a
down the,
factual statement, you were physically in the Capitol, and
yes.
theoretically, that's one thing. Okay, whether
I
and versus
trespassing.
you're part of a
Okay.
conspiracy to overthrow the government.
Right. I
It-
know. I mean,
it's a completely different level of things.
and
So
this is how,
okay, so
oh,
now what was your sentence?
okay. So I was sentenced. We went back September 1st. We were sentenced of 2023. And I got a year of house arrest. I got 250 hours of community service, 5 years of probation. Um, I had to pay $1,000 restitution. I had to pay $525 in court costs. I had to have monitoring software installed on my computer to make sure I'm not communicating with any subversive types, I guess. I don't know.
Okay,
To which I had to pay $44 a month. Um, let's see. I think that's it. Yeah.
so were you inclined? Could you have appealed? Did you appeal? What was the
Um, you know, given that most of the other people besides me, my husband, and this Michael Green, everybody else, well, and then this one autistic boy who was an oath keeper, the judge didn't send us to prison, but the other 2 ladies got sent to prison. And we could have appealed, and we talked about it, but I said, what's the point? The
okay?
appeal's going to be in DC too. I mean, there is no way, if you're a Trump supporter, you're going to get a fair shake in DC. It's just not going to happen.
Well, do you okay, so you're have your sentence. Yeah, I think you had told me the other day when we spoke briefly that you also got a thing where they were coming after you, or
Oh,
maybe
a
not
civil suit.
federally, for
Yeah.
restitution for damage,
Yes.
and maybe cover that real quick.
Yeah. There was a civil suit filed by the District of Columbia against the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and we were named separately on that same suit.
Okay.
So that went on for a few years, and just recently it was resolved. They actually dropped it, but before they dropped it,
Yeah.
They wanted us to pay $50,000. And they wanted us to admit that we were part of a conspiracy. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. And so we ended up getting them down to, like $20,000.
Okay.
So we were thinking we're going to have to pay this $20,000. And then all of a sudden, in the last week or so, the civil suit was dropped. I guess they
Okay.
figured they couldn't get any more money because a lot of these people, they had ruined their lives. I mean, they had no money. We don't have a lot of money. So, they couldn't pay the high priced lawyers and, but
Okay.
so
So now so when was it that you were sentenced? When was that
that was
about?
September 1st of 2023.
September 1st, 2023.
Yeah.
So then you're just going to basically tolerate it at that point. You're not going
Yeah.
to appeal. And so how did then, if we fast forward, if we miss something in the middle there, tell me, but then you get to Trump gets reelected. Did you feel like when Trump got reelected that this could be good that we'll get pardoned? Because obviously there was a lot of push for Trump to pardon J6'ers before, way before he actually did.
I thought that was a possibility, but mind you, I had already served my sentence.
Okay.
At that point. I had already done my house arrest. I'd already done my community service. I'd already done everything. Except
Was the
I still had
software off your
probation.
computer at that point?
No, it was still on the computer. So that was still there. And I was still on probation. For the probation and the house arrest ran concurrently. So I probably had another 3 years-ish, 3.5 years of probation.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I hoped, I was hoping that there would be a pardon. I noticed somebody asked me if we brought firearms yourself to the Capitol that day. The answer is no, absolutely not.
Yeah, I kind of brushed that off because you had already said earlier there were
Yeah,
no firearms. You didn't have any firearms. You already said earlier that the Oath Keeper guys you were with, as far as you know, didn't have any firearms.
No.
So okay, yeah, we had covered that. But okay. So tell us a little bit about how the pardon came to be, or how you kind of the progression of things with that.
It was funny because I watched the inaugural events all day. I watched all of that when Trump was inaugurated. And in the evening, I guess he went back to the Oval Office or wherever, and that's when he signed the pardon. And I saw him sign this for 1,600 people, I think, or 1,600 people he said he was pardoning.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, am I one of those? Because I don't know how many total people were arrested on January 6th. So I really didn't know. And so we ended up going to bed early kind of that night, and I left my phone downstairs. And I'm up in bed watching the news some more on Newsmax or whatever. And I see this guy on there being interviewed that got a pardon. And the interviewer says, so how did you find out that you were pardoned? And he said, well, my attorney called me. And I thought, oh my gosh, I left my phone downstairs. Run down, get my phone. And sure enough, my attorney had called me. And so I called him back, and I'm waking my husband up, and I'm got him on the speakerphone. And he said, I am happy to be the bearer of good news for a change. You have been pardoned by President Trump. And I was just, I can't even begin to describe the feeling, the weight that was lifted. It was just like I was on cloud 9.
Well, how do you? So then you told me that you sent me this certificate. I think last week or the week before, but you didn't get it originally. Maybe tell people it was.
Right.
You don't just,
Right.
They just don't fax you send you a certificate.
Yeah, you actually have to apply with the pardon office. You know, and it's just a little online form you fill out, and then they send them an email basically, and you just print them out. So, yeah, so it was, but I wanted the certificate. I want to frame it. I want, you know, I feel like, oh my gosh, this is just the best ever.
So okay, so you're you know what? This is a joke, Sandy, but so I guess Trump didn't know that right before they swore in Biden, he could have issued a preemptive pardon to you, like Biden did for
Right.
all these other people. So, but you did the. By the way, when you did the paperwork, was it like complicated paperwork or was it pretty
No,
straight, simple?
no, it was real easy. You
Okay,
just
and then
had,
how long
yeah,
did it take to get this certificate back? That
just a couple days.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it went really quick.
So you know what? You know what's funny? I'm going to flip back here because I'm going to put this back up. Let's see if I hit the right thing here. Okay. So I want to flip back to this, and I heard once somebody say, "I'm going to put the Capitol up there." I think it was actually the liberal comedian. Okay, liberal comedian Jimmy Dore. I like to, because a lot of times I feel like a lot of times the struggle is between people that have common sense and have no common sense versus some of
Right.
the political stuff. But one of the things I think he says, like when you look at this building, is it an emblem to you of justice? Is it an emblem to you of honor? Is it an emblem to you of integrity? Is it an emblem to you of values? Or is it an entirely different type of emblem? Okay. And,
Hmm.
has it become an emblem of tyranny? Has it become an emblem of injustice?
Yep.
Has it become an emblem of irresponsibility?
Yep.
Of decadence and perversion and stuff like this. So
Yep.
how do you feel about, you know, the government? Because on the one hand, I always tell people like, okay, so you've got to feel good to be pardoned. You
Yes.
feel bad for what happened to you. And I
Yes.
always tell people like, we never forget Trump's only one guy, and he's not going to be here forever.
Yep.
And so, what's kind of your feeling about the government and the founding principles of justice, and just how do I would just leave me with such a sour feeling, but how do you feel about it?
I do have a lot of I wouldn't say bitterness, but I do have this fear that they'll come after me again, some way, somehow. My trust level with the judicial system, particularly in Washington, my trust level with the people who are supposed to be representing us in the
Right.
House and the Senate. I think there are some good people, and but I think there's a lot that aren't, and it doesn't matter what party,
Right.
because I think there are, like Mitch McConnell. I didn't think he was a very good Republican. Some of the
You
other,
remember Dan Bongino's that saying is, remember, most Republicans in Congress are actually Democrats, but no Democrats are Republicans.
right?
But I
Yeah,
feel like even it doesn't really matter. You basically have people that are intellectually honest and people that are intellectually dishonest. And that's not most of these people are uniparty, serve themselves,
absolutely.
and I have you probably have an unbelievable respect after what you've been through. But I feel like just personally, not anything criminal, but I never knew, I'm 59. And until like 4 or 5 years ago, I would have well, a little longer than that, but let's say 8 years ago, from like 2016 to now, I would have felt like, oh, yeah, well, the justice system is pretty much, probably good and all that. I wouldn't, but the more I've gotten involved with it at the local level,
Yeah,
I've actually had good experience at the federal level. At the local level, I would say it is, and what makes me think about it is, wow, how many people that are just regular people get screwed by the system every day
yeah,
and don't have the voice to speak up, maybe don't have the access.
Beautiful.
They
The
don't. They
money.
just
It's
the money, the access, the education. And I don't mean education like I'm just saying like that. And it's just so sad because I can't imagine how you be part of such a system and not feel like it needs to be about honor. And I tell you what, one thing is like judges, I'll put them, but lawyers, they're some of the most corrupt, crooked, lying people I've ever seen.
I know
Not all of them. I have some lawyer friends,
no,
but not all of them. But
there are
it's just
good. There
amazing
are
how much
good.
they are willing to lie, basically.
But I think the thing that bothers me the most is about our elected officials in the House and the Senate is the fact that I think so many of them are enriching themselves.
Right.
And, that's why they go there. It's money and power.
Right.
It's not, it's not to do the will of the people that elect them. It's to enrich themselves and become powerful and wealthy.
Right.
And that is just what that's not what the founding fathers had. That's why term limits, I think, are absolute must.
Well, we have Ohio term limits where all the people just revolve into their chairs and they go to different,
Right.
but
Right.
like right now, our Congressman David Taylor. Okay, so why I can't imagine how it's complicated that the number one most important thing for all Americans, young or old, is we have got to quit spending money we do not have.
Right.
If you had a household and you had young kids, parents, grandma and grandpa live there, and we're spending money like drunken sailors that we don't have, there can't be anything else that's a bigger priority than stopping it. And so I can't even understand intellectually that somebody like David Taylor isn't screaming this every day. I mean, somebody like Thomas Massey does, but nobody's screaming that every day, and they know it's going to destroy the future.
Right.
For so many people, it just destroys the future. But that's off on a tangent from what happened on J6. I actually like, I know I've mentioned three or four times, like Jimmy Dore, liberal comic, of him saying like, so are we really supposed to believe this as liberals that the Trump the MAGA army was going to overthrow the country, but none of them brought any weapons with them?
Right.
They forgot their weapons. Like
the real insurrection was the January 6th Select Committee. That was the real insurrection.
Right.
I'm sorry, but
we don't know about that because they destroyed all their records.
Well,
anyway,
you never get rid of everything. Especially
what else? I appreciate you spending so much time, and we're going on like an hour and a half almost, but it's very interesting and very enlightening. And I just try to remind people, man, Donald Trump is only one guy, and who are the local Donald Trumps? Who are the statewide Donald Trumps? Who are the, why is the only person that yells out about, like I do, but has a lot of stuff I don't. Why is it that a foreign-born businessman, Elon Musk, is the one? Where are all of our American-born businessmen?
Right.
Where are they? It's just pathetic. It's just pathetic, and it's so sad. And the weaponization of the justice system against people. And even like on the censorship stuff, I tell people the biggest thing one of the biggest things censorship causes is you get people that are going to be outspoken and beaten over the head regardless, but it's self-censorship. Okay, you become afraid to speak out, you become afraid to speak up, you become afraid that they're going to come after me again. And
Facebook closed my account.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wouldn't dare post anything about anything, because one of the things they used against me in my trial was after the election, I wrote an email to my friends and I said, you know what? This is not right. I think that election was stolen and we need to fight this. And what we do is we write our congressman, we write our senator, we write them and let them know that they need to dig into this. But in that email, the prosecution, they just pulled out the little sentence where I said, we need to fight. And my attorney's like, excuse me, but this is what she really said.
Right.
But saying that spoke to my frame of mind. And they got me that
Well,
the tampering with evidence was because I had to get a new phone. I had an old iPhone and the battery died. So after J6, I get a new phone. Everything's transferred over to my new phone, right?
well, now he's right and wrong on some things. I want to wrap us up here, but if anybody wants to, like, on the notion of when you said fight being interpreted as, you're gonna is
Physically.
Glenn Greenwald, who's also a liberal, okay, does some great stuff. He's a lawyer. I don't know if you even know him, but he was the guy that Edward Snowden went to, and he won a Pulitzer and all these awards. Now he's hated by because he wouldn't play the normal media game. But he talks, it's very fascinating if somebody knows what they're talking about, to talk about free speech cases in America. And the notion that, like, the word fight is some big, there have been cases that Greenwald will cover. One of the preeminent, and I'm sorry for going on, but one of the preeminent, I can't remember the case, what the names are, but a preeminent First Amendment speech case involved a union where they were picketing someplace, and somebody was giving a speech how if any scabs tried to come across here, they were going to kill them, basically. And that was ruled protected speech. Why? Because there was nobody actually there that was trying to cross, and the words said without somebody actually doing it were not, And so the funny thing about Glenn Greenwald is, if anybody's into this kind of stuff, go find one of his podcasts where he's talking about First Amendment things, because he'll go through all the cases that establish the key principles of First Amendment rights. And if there's not an imminent threat of violence, for example, because you're using violent rhetoric, but nobody's there that's been deemed free speech historically. So he's very liberal, but he's very on this. This is a very dangerous, slippery slope that you start dumbing down the concept of free speech. And that's why I personally hate, I'll go with what Glenn Greenwald says, quote unquote, hate speech is protected speech. It's First Amendment speech. You're allowed to have idiotic views. The reality is that how that gets sorted out is people don't pay attention to you, because you're
right at some point. They quit listening.
In any event, hey, I appreciate the time that you have spent. I'm sorry for the ordeal you went through. What would you? Last question I'll ask you is, if it was all happening over again, what would you do different?
I would have never gone to Washington. I just wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't have gone.
Okay. All right. Well, Sandi, I really appreciate you joining me here for this, and I hope a lot of people will watch it and just hear. And I told Sandi I'd done this thing in the RJ Cinema with like 6 people that have been there. None of them went into the Capitol, and I recorded it at the time. It was like 3 weeks after the event, and the recording got messed up. So hopefully this one will not get messed up, and people will be able to watch it and learn from you and learn from your experiences. So thank you very much, Sandi.
I'm happy to, share the story, because I think people need to realize that the things that we've been taught about or told about that day, that's not the whole story. So.
Right. Well, and there's obvious, I jokingly say, did there people get out of control? Was there this? Was there that? I don't know. Maybe yes. There were obviously yes. Was this some plot to overthrow the government?
No.
That'd be absolutely ridiculous. Okay. No. Like that this was, so all right, Sandi, thank you. Have a great rest of the evening.
I will do.